Hey guys, tonight we step into your new home, a medieval castle. It sounds impressive, doesn't it? Towering stone walls, banners fluttering in the breeze, guards in shiny armor. You probably picture yourself strutting around with a goblet in one hand and a falcon on your shoulder. But here's the thing. Within 5 minutes, your teeth are chattering, your feet are soaked, and you're already wondering where the bathrooms are. Spoiler alert, there aren't any. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this little bedtime ride travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through the castle gate, ducking under the heavy portcullis, and instantly regret your choices. The first thing that hits you isn't awe. It's a wave of damp, nose-crinkling air that smells like wet dog, old cheese, and despair. Your breath fogs in front of your face, even though it's supposedly spring. Stone might look sturdy, but as insulation? Absolute garbage. Cold air oozes out of the walls like a ghost with a grudge. You clutch your cloak tighter, which doesn't help much. It's made of itchy wool and might have been home to a mouse or two. The floors? Flagstones, uneven and perpetually damp, as if the castle is trying to weep for its own miserable existence. And that's just the welcome. Inside the main hall, your boots squelch. Why? Because there's no proper drainage, and someone probably dumped a bucket of wash water in the hallway an hour ago. Most medieval castles didn't have internal plumbing. Water was fetched manually from the well or a nearby stream, and any wastewater, kitchen slop, bath remnants, or worse, was dumped wherever was convenient. Usually, that meant the courtyard or a corner. Sometimes it meant right out the window. You sidestep what might be a puddle, or yesterday's stew. Your new room? It's not much of a step up. A small stone chamber tucked into the wall like a monk's sad daydream. You do have a bed, technically, a wooden frame with a straw mattress. Sounds rustic until you lie down and realize the straw smells like goat and has the structural support of a lumpy pancake. Also, congratulations, you've now got your first fleas, maybe lice if you're lucky. People slept fully clothed to stay warm, which only made it easier for critters to take up permanent residence. You try to find some comfort in the heavy tapestry on the wall. It's colourful, maybe depicting a hunt or a noble wedding, but you're not fooled. It's not there for art. It's a feeble attempt to block drafts, which it doesn't. Outside, the wind howls, literally. Wind often shrieked through the cracks in the stonework, especially at night. Medieval architects prioritized defense over comfort, so your windows. Tiny arrow slits that let in just enough air to chill your soul. Glass was rare and expensive, so most windows were just open holes or covered in oiled cloth. That cloth, it stinks. You might think, well, at least it's secure. Except, not really. Castles weren't just defensive, they were often targets. The minute you move in, you inherit every feud your liege lord ever started. That means you're already on someone's hit list, possibly being watched by a peasant with a grudge and a crossbow. It gets worse when you consider heating. The hearth in your room is cold, its ashes grey and forgotten. Why? Because firewood is limited, and fires are a smoky hazard in these tight stone spaces. The main hall might have a massive central fireplace, but your personal quarters? Maybe a brazier if you're high-ranking. Otherwise, you're layering wool and hoping the rats are warm enough to cuddle. The irony is that castles were often seen as the height of power, symbols of status, dominance, and civilization. Yet the experience of actually living in one was more like extremely uncomfortable camping. Except instead of bears, you're worried about invaders, betrayal, and tetanus. Historians still argue whether most medieval people actually spent much time inside these keeps or preferred the relative freedom of smaller outbuildings and nearby villages. One theory? The main castle was used primarily in times of danger, like a medieval panic room with terrible acoustics and a real risk of scurvy. Speaking of acoustics, everything echoes. Conversations, footsteps, coughs. Privacy is non-existent. You whisper a thought and it ricochets off the walls until someone down the corridor hears you plot to sneak a second serving of stew. And forget secrets. Sound travels and stone walls don't care about your dignity. You step back into the main hall. It's massive and mostly empty, except for long wooden tables, blackened beams and a few torches spitting oily smoke. The smoke has nowhere to go. Chimneys are a newfangled invention and often poorly designed. So the ceiling is coated in centuries of soot. The smell? Think burned bacon fat, mixed with mildew and desperation. There's a servant nearby, scrubbing something off the floor with a rag. You make eye contact and he sighs like a man who's seen too much. You'll learn that look soon, because despite your title or status, everyone pulls some weight here, whether it's fetching water, helping with repairs, or just surviving winter without losing a toe to frostbite. You wander toward the stairs leading to the upper levels, narrow, winding, and oddly steep. They're designed to trip up attackers, but they'll trip you up too. Bonus, they spiral clockwise so defenders coming down have the advantage with their swords. You're left-handed. Guess what? Your castle hates you. At the top you find a narrow gallery overlooking the hall. It creaks under your boots. That's another thing. Many castle interiors were made of wood, which means fire was always a threat. A single careless ember could torch the whole place. They didn't have fire departments, just buckets and panic. Your breath comes in clouds again. You wonder if it ever gets warm here. Answer: not really. Even in summer, castles tend to stay cool because of the thick stone. But that's little comfort when you're still shivering under 3 layers and sleeping beside a brazier that smells like regret. And remember, this is your home. You live here. You wake up here. You try to relax here. You listen to wolves howling outside and wonder if your castle is any more welcoming than the forest. Well, at least there are no mosquitoes. Just fleas, rats, lice, roaches, mold, and ghosts. Probably ghosts. You wake up scratching. Not in a cute, oh I got bitten once kind of way, but a full body, desperate, what is, crawling on me kind of scratching. The straw in your mattress has shifted overnight, exposing you to whatever's been nesting inside it. It's probably a combination of fleas, mites, and possibly one particularly bold mouse. Congratulations, you've now been formally welcomed by the castle's unofficial co-inhabitants. It's still cold. You pull your cloak tighter around you, only to discover it's damp. Not from a spill or an accident, but from the air itself. Medieval castles, built from thick stone and poorly ventilated, are perpetually moist. The walls sweat. The floors weep. If you leave your boots out overnight, don't be surprised to find mushrooms growing in them by morning. The window slit beside your bed leaks. Not water, wind. A sharp, knife-like gust slides across your face every few minutes. You stuff some old cloth into the crack, which helps only a little. There's no glass to speak of, unless you're extraordinarily wealthy, and even then, you'd be staring through greenish, bubbled glass so thick you might as well be looking into a swamp. You head to the kitchen for warmth. Bad move. The kitchen in early castles is either an outbuilding you have to cross the freezing courtyard to get to, or a smoky, claustrophobic chamber attached to the main hall. It smells like boiled cabbage, old grease, and something vaguely fishy that you hope is fish. And rats, always rats. They skitter along the beams overhead, dart across the floor, and sometimes look you dead in the eye with a confidence that says, "This is our home. You're just visiting. You can set traps. You can get a cat. But unless that cat is part python, it's going to be a losing battle." Historians still argue whether medieval people saw rats as pests to be eliminated or just another part of life, like thatch roofs and the occasional plague. Some evidence suggests they were so commonplace, people stopped noticing. you won't have that luxury. As you settle onto a creaky bench, you hear something soft under your hand. Moldavian, the bread. Of course, there's not much food this morning. A chunk of brown bread so dense it might be a weapon, a piece of hard cheese, and something suspiciously grey that might be yesterday's pottage. You eat it anyway. The alternative is hunger, and you already felt your stomach turning angry somersaults 2 hours ago. Clean drinking water? You wish. Your choices are ale, or very weak ale. Even the kids drink it. Water isn't trusted unless it's fresh from the well, and even then it might carry parasites. You think you'll stick with ale. You try to wash your hands. Where? There's a communal basin, already cloudy from 10 people dipping in before you. Soap exists, sort of. It's made from animal fat and ash. It smells like old bacon and feels like damp chalk. But hey, at least it works. Sometimes. You're starting to realize something. The castle isn't just uncomfortable, it's actively hostile. You are never fully dry. You are never fully clean. And you are never alone. Between the rodents, insects, and dozens of other humans all crammed into one stone complex. Privacy is a myth, and silence is rare. Even the quiet has its own sound. The wind through the battlements wails like an abandoned child. Floorboards creak. Distant clangs from the blacksmith's forge echo like thunder. Somewhere, someone's coughing, and it's the kind of cough that makes you nervous. You return to your room to escape the smell of burned onions. On the way, you pass the garderobe, a fancy name for what is essentially a vertical latrine chute. It's a hole in a wooden seat, perched over an open shaft that, if you're lucky, empties into the moat. If you're unlucky, it empties directly onto the outer wall. And yes, that smell, it follows the wind. The walls are damp. The bedding's damp. Even the people feel damp. You begin to understand why disease spreads so easily in castles. Cold, wet environments are perfect breeding grounds for bacteria, and with so many people sharing tight quarters, it doesn't take much for illness to leap from person to person. The Black Death? Yeah, it found castles delightful. And don't think you'll escape by lighting a candle and cozying up in your room. Candles are expensive. Most are made from tallow, rendered animal fat. They sputter, they smoke, and they smell like a greasy barbecue gone wrong. They also attract bugs. Not that there's a shortage of those already. You reach for your blanket, which is made of wool thick enough to double as a yurt covering. It's scratchy, smelly, and mildly damp, because of course it is. You pull it over yourself, hoping for warmth, and feel something shift inside the folds. Is it a spider? A centipede? The existential dread of pre-modern life? You're not sure. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. In some castles, people line the base of their beds with herbs and flowers, not for the smell, but to repel insects and bad spirits. Lavender for fleas, rue for disease, rosemary for strength. Your mattress might be a mossy lump, but at least it smells faintly of desperation and time. You try to sleep, curled like a cold pretzel, but your neighbor in the next chamber starts snoring, loudly. There's no insulation between rooms, just wooden partitions or maybe a hanging curtain. You bang the wall. It only makes him snore louder, like he's winning a contest you never wanted to enter. You finally drift off. Maybe. Then drip, drip, drip. You sit up. There's water leaking from the ceiling, again. Somewhere above you, snow is melting into cracks in the stone, sliding between beams, and forming slow, rhythmic droplets that are now targeting your blanket like it's the last dry thing on earth. You grab a bucket. The cold settles back in like a jealous lover. The rat from earlier is back, watching you. You name him Gerald because at this point, you need some kind of emotional support. Gerald isn't impressed. You lie there, listening to the wind scream through the corridor, Gerald chewing on something suspicious, and the occasional creak of the building settling. You wonder how people ever romanticized this life. Knights, kings, castles, none of that comes with an instruction manual for how not to freeze to death in your own bed. And the sad part? You're one of the lucky ones. You live in a castle. This is the high life. Out there, beyond the walls, peasants are living in huts made of mud and sticks, with pigs sleeping in their kitchens. But still, you're not exactly thriving. At least you've got Gerald. Morning comes again, but it's hard to tell at first. Sunlight struggles to make it through the slit in the stone wall, dribbling in like an afterthought. You're still curled under your wool blanket, with Gerald staring at you like he's the landlord checking on late rent. Your joints ache, your neck is stiff, and despite it all, you have responsibilities. You dress in the same clothes you slept in, because of course you did. That's just how things work here. Bathing isn't exactly a daily ritual. It's more of a seasonal adventure. Maybe once a month, if the weather's forgiving and someone's boiled enough water. Otherwise, you freshen up with a damp cloth and a prayer. You've stopped questioning the persistent smell that lingers around everyone, including yourself. It's a shared scent now, a signature fragrance of mold, wool, and human persistence. You step into the corridor and almost get run over by a boy carrying firewood. He doesn't apologize, just stumbles past you like he's late for the apocalypse. You follow the sound of clanging to the great hall. It's breakfast, if you can call it that. And here's where castle life really shows its cards, the chaos of communal living. You are never truly alone. The great hall is the heart of the castle, and its less noble sanctuary and more medieval food court meets human zoo. Children scream, dogs bark, someone is yelling about a missing chicken, and the lord of the castle is trying to enjoy his oat mush in peace. Spoiler, he won't. You sit at a long wooden table. The surface is stained from years of spilled ale, grease, and what you hope is berry juice. There are no individual plates, just a common trenchard, a slab of stale bread used as a plate, eventually eaten or tossed to the poor. It absorbs your lukewarm stew and turns into a sponge of questionable hygiene. And yes, you're eating stew for breakfast. Again, it's called pottage, and it's the default meal for the masses. Boiled grains, root vegetables, maybe a scrap of meat if someone got lucky with a snare or bribe. It cooks in the same pot day after day. You don't start a new batch, you just keep adding to it. Some joke it's the same stew from 10 winters ago. Historians still argue whether this perpetual pot was practical nourishment or just a medieval health hazard in disguise. You eat, carefully avoiding the bit that looks like a toenail. You don't ask. You never ask. Someone beside you sneezes, not into their elbow, not into a cloth, just into the room. It echoes. And this is where the real issue sets in, the absolute lack of hygiene. No one washes their hands before meals, because the concept of germ theory won't be discovered for centuries. People share drinking vessels. You wipe your mouth with the same sleeve that was brushing against a chamber pot earlier. You start to feel itchy again. And let's talk about that, the chamber pots. Since the garderobe is inconveniently placed in the outer wall, most people just use portable pots kept under the bed. In the morning, these are dumped, if someone remembers, out the nearest window or into the courtyard. You're learning to never walk near the outer walls without glancing up first. Surprise precipitation is rarely rain. You step outside for some air and immediately regret it. The courtyard smells like horses, rot and damp straw. Mud squelches under your feet and you nearly lose a boot. There are chickens strutting around like they own the place. They might. You try to avoid stepping in what they've left behind. Out here, the castle's noise softens into a dull roar. The blacksmith is pounding metal into shape near a forge that belches smoke. Sparks dance in the air. You spot a kitchen servant dragging a headless goose. Two soldiers argue over who last cleaned the weapons rack. One of them is probably wrong, and both of them are shouting like the truth depends on volume. You wander toward the stables, curious. The smell punches you in the face like a knight with anger issues. Manure, sweat, and old hay blended into an olfactory nightmare. The horses look tired. You feel a kinship. Someone waves you over to the well. Time to fetch water. You sigh. The bucket creaks as it lowers. The rope is rough against your palms. When it comes back up, it's heavy and splashes your feet with icy, suspiciously cloudy liquid. You haul it toward the kitchen, trying not to spill, slipping once, but catching yourself on a bale of hay that disintegrates on contact. And now your tunic smells like damp hay and shame. At least you're outside, right? But even here, you can't escape the castle's oppressive weight. The high walls loom, blocking light, trapping cold air. You realize this place isn't designed for comfort. It's designed for siege. Every brick screams, defend, survive, endure. No wonder joy seems rationed like salt. You spot some children playing with a pig bladder. It's inflated like a balloon and being kicked around the courtyard. Medieval soccer, more or less. One of the kids falls, stands, and proudly shows off his scraped knee, already decorated with a dab of mud and horse droppings. He's grinning like he won something. Kids are resilient like that. You return to your chamber to clean up. The water in the basin is cold and smells faintly metallic. You splash some on your face and gasp. There's no towel, so you shake like a dog and wipe your hands on your already dirty tunic. Congratulations. You're ready for your next task, chores. Because castle life isn't just waiting for feasts and jousts. It's a machine with 1,000 moving parts, and everyone pulls their weight, or pays for it. You help patch a hole in a wooden shutter, your hands going numb from the cold. The nails are uneven. The hammer is bent. The shutter still lets in the wind, but now it also squeaks ominously. You think you're done, but then someone shouts that a section of the outer wall needs inspection. You get roped in, literally. A fraying rope is tied around your waist as you scale the narrow stairway to the battlements. The view is stunning until the wind almost knocks you over. Up here, you see it all. The frozen fields, the brown river curling like a tired snake, the dark outline of distant woods. Beautiful, sure, but also a reminder. This castle is a tiny stone bubble floating in a vast ocean of wilderness and uncertainty. You trudge back down, legs aching. A servant brushes past you, muttering about leaking roofs. You consider mentioning the drip above your bed, but decide against it. One more complaint and they might stick you on roof duty. In the snow. Back inside you pass the chapel. It's quiet, lit with a few flickering candles. You duck in, just for a moment of peace. The air is still, heavy with incense and old stone. You sit on a bench, close your eyes and almost forget the fleas, the cold and the stew. Almost. Then a bell rings. Time to help haul firewood to the great hall. Because in a castle, rest is temporary. Misery? That's the baseline. You're hauling wood. Again. The fire in the great hall never stays lit without constant feeding, and since everything is cold and damp, including the logs themselves, it takes effort, serious effort. Your hands are raw from splinters and soot. The sleeves of your tunic are stiff with smoke. You pause to lean on a beam, coughing into your shoulder, and that's when the steward spots you. Bad timing. You're reassigned. No rest, no explanation, just a barked order and a thumb jerked toward the lower floor. The cellars. Oh no. The stairs downward are narrow, spiral, and just slightly too small for comfort. You descend in a stoop, careful not to slip on the damp stone. The air gets colder, thicker, like it's been holding its breath for centuries. Your breath becomes visible, curling like fog. The smell down here is a cocktail of root vegetables, brine, mold, and forgotten things. You're in the storage cellars now, the dark underbelly of castle life. And suddenly you understand why no one ever volunteers for this job. Barrels line the walls, some filled with salted meats, others with fish so pungent it's probably still capable of swimming away in spirit. You step over a pile of turnips, knock your knee against a crate of onions, and nearly trip over a rat carcass. At least Gerald's cousin didn't die in your bed. Your task? Inventory. You're to count jars, note levels, and report any signs of spoilage. Which is a cute idea. considering that everything down here smells like it's halfway spoiled. You pry the lid off a barrel of pickled cabbage and instantly regret being born with a nose. Still, you count. And this is where you discover something interesting. Food isn't just stored. It's rationed with military precision. Nothing is wasted. Not the meat, not the bones, not even the fat skimmed off the top of the broth pots. In fact, that fat is saved, hardened, and sometimes reused in cooking, or, more disturbingly, in making candles. You might be lighting dinner with last week's dinner. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly suffered year-round food shortages or simply experienced regular seasonal lean times. Either way, the fear of running out hangs over this cellar like a ghost. You move to another row of barrels, ale, mead, some kind of vinegary wine. You're careful not to disturb the dust. You've heard stories of people going missing down here, mostly jokes. Careful, or the cheese wheel ghost will get you. But when you're alone in the dark, even cheese ghosts start to feel plausible. You carry your tally list back upstairs, where your nose is suddenly hit with the less than refreshing smell of wet dogs. Not literal dogs, though yes, there are those, but the metaphorical kind. Unwashed clothes, mouldy cloaks, and chainmail that hasn't seen vinegar or sand in a year. Welcome to Castle Laundry Day. You make the mistake of walking past the laundry area, a small, miserable side chamber near the scullery. A pot of water is boiling, sort of. More like steaming suspiciously. A woman slaps linens against a stone board with the force of a blacksmith, muttering curses in Old French. You wave, and she snarls. You keep walking. Suddenly, you hear commotion near the chapel entrance. Curious, you follow the noise. A messenger has arrived, mud-splattered, panting, his horse steaming like a cauldron. Everyone gathers. Rumours fly instantly. A tax notice? A summons to war? A noble visit? Turns out it's the last one. The steward yells that the castle must prepare for guests. A collective groan echoes through the courtyard. Castle guests are the worst. They expect clean bedding, hot meals, and cheerful conversation. The irony? The castle barely has enough for the people already living in it. But you don't argue. Orders are orders. Your next assignment, preparing the guest chamber. You sigh. That room hasn't been used in months, maybe years. It smells like old velvet and mouse urine. You light a torch and head in. The chamber is cold, even colder than yours, and the stone walls are stained with damp. There's a bed, but the mattress is lumpy, probably filled with straw that's half dust now. You shake it out and gag when a family of silverfish scuttles across the frame. You lay fresh linens, which means dragging in layers of wool and linen from the stores, some of which are stained, most of which are questionable. You try not to think about the last person who used them. You fluff the pillow. It poofs with dust. You do not sneeze. You are stronger than this. Quirky fact time. In some castles, guests were offered sweet-smelling sachets, tiny pouches filled with herbs, dried flowers, or even crushed amber, to hang by their beds or tuck into their sleeves. Not out of kindness, really. More like a polite way of masking body odor. You place one of these sachets, lavender and mint, on the bedpost. It smells vaguely like soap and regret. Then comes the real punishment, scrubbing the guest's garderobe. You kneel beside it with vinegar, a rag, and the slow realization that you now know what true humility feels like. You remind yourself, this guest might bring news, or gifts, or at least enough gossip to keep the castle buzzing for a week. Word travels fast. By sundown, everyone knows who the guest is, a minor noble, rumoured to be flirtatious, fond of dice, and terrible at paying debts. You silently hope they forget to arrive. They don't. Trumpets blare the next morning. They're here. You're assigned to stable duty. It's your job to help manage their horses, which means mud and saddles, and more manure than you thought biologically possible. You wipe your hands on your tunic, now basically a wearable napkin, and step back as the noble dismounts. They don't thank you. Of course not. You're a background character in their story. They sweep into the great hall, all furs and perfume, while you go fetch water for their bath. Yes, a bath. Guests get them. Regular folks? You wash when the pond isn't frozen. You boil water bucket by bucket, dumping it into a heavy wooden tub. Steam rises. You smell rosemary. Someone actually bothered to steep herbs into the water. Must be nice. You haul another bucket and nearly drop it on your foot. The noble finally soaks, humming to themselves. You get sent out to fetch more logs. Again. You sit on a stone step afterward, arms aching, tunic clinging to your back with sweat. You think about running away. You really do. But where would you go? The forest? Filled with outlaws. The next village? Riddled with famine. The monastery? You're not ready for that haircut, so you stay. You head back in, catch the faint scent of roast meat drifting from the kitchen, and realize you haven't eaten since dawn. Maybe, they'll let you lick the carving knife once the noble's done. Welcome to castle life, where luxury exists, but always just above your reach. Dinner service begins with shouting. The kitchen is a frenzy of voices, clattering pots, and smoke, so much smoke. You can barely see, and you definitely can't breathe properly. A scullion nearly knocks you over with a platter of turnips, while someone else is yelling about burnt goose legs. Like it's the end of the world. It might be. The noble guest is expecting a feast, and the castle has maybe 3 impressive dishes left in it. You're handed a trencher of bread and told to get moving. Dinner waits for no one. Back in the great hall, torches flicker along the stone walls, casting long shadows that dance like ghosts. The table is long and groaning, not just with food, but with the weight of exaggerated expectations. The guest sits at the high table beside the lord, goblet in hand, already 2 sips past dignity. You slip into the line of servants distributing food and try not to breathe too obviously. Here's your job tonight. Serve, step back, stay silent, and absolutely do not drop anything. You're pretty sure someone once lost a finger for sneezing near the roast. The food smells incredible, if you haven't smelled anything but turnip stew for a week. There's roasted venison, a swan decorated with its own feathers, and a pie that actually holds together when sliced. This is not a normal night. This is castle showmanship. A culinary lie. You stand still and invisible behind the table. You watch them eat. You do not eat. Not yet. Your stomach growls loud enough that the steward glances at you. Later, maybe. If there's anything left. And if no dogs get to it first. The guest starts talking, loudly, about their lands, their horses, a hilarious incident involving a drunken priest and a beehive. Everyone laughs, because they must. The guests' jokes are required listening, even if most of them land like bricks. You fake a smile and think about bread. Suddenly music. A pair of minstrels enter, lutes in hand, and begin a tune about heroic deeds and tragic romance. It's catchy. Someone claps along. The noble requests a love song, and the musicians obligingly switch to something weepy and poetic. It's supposed to set the mood. Instead, it sets off an argument. 2 of the lord's sons start bickering about a falcon. You don't catch all the words, but it involves accusations of sabotage, bird theft, and some very unbrotherly name-calling. The guest laughs too hard, knocking over their wine. It soaks the tablecloth, and before anyone can stop them, they use the lord's sleeve to dab it up. You hold your breath. The lord says nothing. This is politics, after all. Better to be disrespected than to start a feud. And speaking of politics, here comes the after-dinner talk, the real reason for the feast. Land agreements, debts owed, minor military favours, a marriage alliance proposal for a niece no one's ever met. This is where castles stop being homes and become strategy rooms. You're still standing nearby, of course, just close enough to hear snippets, just far enough to be forgotten. A historical fact that might amuse you while your feet go numb. Feasts like this weren't just for pleasure. They were tools of diplomacy, complete with seating charts based on status and subtle signals hidden in the menu. Who got goose and who got cabbage? That mattered. What's served tells you who you are. Eventually the guest rises, declares the food tolerably edible, and totters off toward their chamber, surrounded by laughter and the scent of spoiled fruit. You're left to clear the wreckage. Bones, crumbs, spilled ale, a spoon someone managed to bend in half. It all gets scraped into buckets for the pigs, or the kitchen boys, depending on what it is. You finally snatch a crust of bread and a smear of honey left on a trencher. You savor it like it's gold. You don't even care that it was already partially chewed. Dinner's done. But your night? Far from over. Now comes entertainment. The hall transforms. The trestle tables are folded away, and a few of the younger nobles start a dancing game. It's more flailing than dancing, honestly. A girl spins too fast and crashes into a barrel. Someone else falls asleep in the corner with their face in a pie. You're ordered to refill goblets, keep the fire stoked, and, if absolutely necessary, gently remove anyone who passes out face first on the Lord's ceremonial rug. This continues for hours. Midnight passes. The noble is now reciting poetry to a broom. You don't ask. Eventually, the steward waves you off. You stumble toward the back stairs, feet throbbing. You pass the guards changing shifts, the older one handing off a rusty halberd like it's a cursed torch. The night watch begins, but thankfully it's not your turn. You climb to your chamber, Gerald waiting, and collapse onto your straw mattress, fully clothed. You smell like wine, grease, and embarrassment. Your head throbs with the beat of the minstrel's final tune. And then, just as you're falling asleep, the bells. Someone's missing. A kitchen maid. No one's panicking yet, but they want all hands on deck. You groan, sit up, and prepare to search the castle by torchlight. As you pass a window slit, the cold night air touches your face. The stars are out. The moonlight casts long, crooked shadows across the stone. For a moment, you see the castle not as a prison, but as a beast, alive, groaning, moving beneath your feet. You follow the search party down the corridor, torch in hand. This is your life now. Waiting, watching, working, and hoping the guest doesn't extend their stay. The missing maid turns up before dawn, huddled in the laundry alcove, fast asleep behind a heap of wet linens. You're relieved, if only because it means you can finally return to bed. The steward scolds her half-heartedly and sends everyone back to their chambers with a wave. No one wants to be awake anymore. You get maybe 2 hours of actual rest before the bells ring again. Morning. Again. A new day begins, and with it a new headache. You rise with a grunt, legs aching, and slide your feet into shoes still damp from yesterday's snowmelt. You consider faking illness, but last time someone tried that, they ended up shoveling ash from the fireplaces all week just to sweat out the demons. South, no faking. Breakfast, such as it is, consists of hard bread, a piece of onion, and a watery ale that tastes like it's given up on life. You chew in silence, watching Gerald pluck straw from his hair. Another feast today, he mumbles. More guests coming, from the south. You want to scream, but instead, you get up and prepare for what will become a familiar, exhausting ritual, the pre-feast cleaning. Again. And today, the Lord has ordered a deep clean, which means tackling the thing everyone's been pretending doesn't exist. The garderobes. Yes, the toilets. You trudge toward the southeast tower, holding your breath even before you get close. The castle's latrines are ingeniously designed, technically. Stone chutes built into the walls that drop waste straight down into a moat or cesspit. On paper, it sounds efficient. In practice, it smells like the apocalypse. You arrive to find the garderobe crew already looking miserable. Buckets of lye, stiff brushes, cloths that will never be clean again. One guy, Tom, you think, has tied a cloth soaked in rosemary water around his nose. It's not helping. Your task? Scrape the chute walls. You gag twice before even starting. Here's a historical fun fact to brighten this horror show. In some castles, nobles believed the drafty air from the chutes could carry disease, so they hung herbs or cloth over the openings, hoping to block miasmas. Sometimes they even tossed perfumed oils down just to mask the scent. It didn't work. You can confirm that firsthand. As you scrub, you hear water slosh and someone retching down the corridor. You focus on your breathing, through your mouth, unfortunately, and try not to think about your life choices. You wonder, what if you had run off? Joined a travelling troupe? Learned to read Latin? Maybe even joined a monastery after all? But then you remember, even monks have latrines. Probably cleaner, but still. You finally finish, arms sore, soul shattered. Your clothes are an olfactory crime scene. You toss your rag into a bin that might as well be a tomb and hurry to the well to rinse off. Water, by the way, is not exactly fresh. The castle well sits in the inner courtyard and the water's clear enough, but you've seen what lives down there. Small frogs, floating feathers, and once, disturbingly, what looked like a human tooth. You wash anyway. You have no choice. As you splash water on your face, you glance up and spot something odd. The noble guest from yesterday sneaking into the stables. Alone, curious. You wander over, trying not to be obvious. You peek inside and see the guest rifling through saddle packs, muttering. They pull something out, a scroll, and tuck it quickly under their cloak. You freeze. That scroll bore the Lord's seal. Uh-oh. You back away, heart pounding. You're not sure what you saw. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's treason. You could report it, but then again, you're not exactly in a position to accuse nobles of anything. Last time someone did, they lost 3 fingers and were reassigned to moat duty. You say nothing. Yet. Later that day, the castle buzzes with activity. Word spreads that a hunting party is assembling. The noble guest wants sport, and the lord is obliging. Deer, boar, maybe a fox if they're lucky. All hands are needed to prep the gear. You're assigned to arrow duty. Great. You follow the Fletcher to the workshop, a drafty, dusty space tucked beside the barracks. He's already shouting instructions, balancing a quill behind his ear. Your job is to sort arrowheads and test the fletching. Make sure each arrow flies straight. You quickly learn. It's repetitive, boring, and oddly satisfying. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some medieval arrows were barbed not just to cause more damage, but to be nearly impossible to pull out cleanly. Nasty little tools of war, even when used for hunting. As you work, you catch snatches of conversation from the nearby squires. They say the noble's a spy. Nonsense, just a gambler, owes half the southern lords. Swear I saw him hiding a scroll. Your ears burn. So, maybe you're not the only one who noticed. You finish arrow prep and deliver the bundle to the armory. The hunting party departs shortly after, riding through the castle gates with fanfare and barking hounds. You're not invited. Of course not. You're left to sweep the courtyard and help the cook prep celebratory stew for their return. Celebratory stew. What a concept. It's the same stew you had last week, and the week before that. A vague brownish mush that includes allegedly venison and lentils. Mostly lentils. As the pot simmers, you sneak a glance out the gate. The hunting party disappears into the forest, capes billowing, weapons gleaming. For a moment, you're envious. The air out there is probably clean. The animals don't smell like feet, and no one's asking them to scrub latrines. But then again, boars can kill you. You stir the pot, muttering, maybe lentils aren't so bad. The steward finds you just before sunset. Lord wants you, now. Your heart sinks. You follow him up the main stairs, through the hall, into the solar, where the Lord sits alone, looking over documents. He doesn't smile. I hear you were near the stables earlier. You freeze. Did someone say something? Is this about the scroll? Is this how you die? You manage a nod. Just fetching water, my lord. He stares, then waves you off. You exhale like you've never exhaled before. As you walk out, you hear him mutter to himself, "Keep your friends close, and your ledgers closer." Whatever's going on, you're in the middle of it now. A servant with secrets, the worst kind. You head back to your chamber. Gerald's asleep, snoring like thunder. You lie down beside him, staring at the rafters, wondering if tomorrow will be better. You already know the answer. You wake up to shouts and bells again. This time it's not about missing maids or chamber pot mishaps. Someone's been robbed. The hunting party returned last night just before curfew. Everyone looked flushed, triumphant and hungry, except for the noble guest. He looked nervous. The Lord noticed too. And this morning, a prized hunting dagger has gone missing. Not just any dagger. The dagger. The one gifted to the Lord by a visiting king, with a hilt of carved ivory and a ruby pressed into the pommel. It's ceremonial, rarely used. And now it's gone. You're dragged from your chamber by the steward, who's in full storm mode. "Where were you last night?" he demands. You stammer something about the kitchens, stew duty, general exhaustion. He doesn't believe you, but he has bigger targets. The guest is gone, vanished sometime between the late night stew and sunrise. Horse missing, saddle missing. Even his travelling companions can't or won't say where he's gone. Everyone's pretending to be confused, but, you saw that scroll. You say nothing. Again. And here's where things get tricky. When things go missing in a medieval castle, there's no CSI unit or fingerprint dust. There's just suspicion, rank, and punishment. The higher-ups guess, and the lower-downs suffer. Already, one stable boy is in the stocks. Another might lose an ear. The Lord's furious, humiliated, and not in a merciful mood. You're told to help search the guest's old chamber. You step carefully over overturned trunks and spilled powder. Some sort of crushed flower. A love charm, maybe, or poison. Historians still argue whether travelling nobles carried these powders as seduction aids or protection from bad humours. You rifle through scraps of parchment, half-eaten cheese, and a single silk glove that smells faintly of clove. You find nothing, but you feel watched. Later in the kitchens, the cook corners you. "You were near him," she whispers, eyes darting. "Did he say anything? Leave anything?" She's sweating like a ham in the hearth oven. You lie. Again. "Nothing, ma'am." She stares, then nods. "Good. Best keep it that way." It's not a threat exactly, but it doesn't feel like advice either. You spend the rest of the day in a daze. You've cleaned chamber pots, scrubbed cauldrons, and even got tasked with untangling a tapestry that fell from the hall wall. Turns out, the back of that thing is crawling with beetles. But all the while, your brain loops through the same thought. What was in that scroll? That night, you hear whispers in the corridor. Gerald's asleep, of course, so you sneak out barefoot and follow the sound. It leads you down the back stairs, past the cold pantry, and into the castle chapel. Inside, candlelight flickers. The Lord is there, kneeling before the altar, but he's not praying. He's reading. That same scroll. So he got it back? Or never lost it? You don't move. You just listen. He speaks quietly to himself. If this is true, the northern border is vulnerable. You slip away before you're noticed, heart hammering. Political secrets, stolen blades, vanished guests. Whatever story you thought you were in, it's something bigger now. The next morning, everything changes. New visitors arrive, knights in darker cloaks, bearing the king's seal. They're not here for a feast. Their horses are armoured, their faces unreadable. You learn quickly. The castle is under quiet inspection, which, in castle terms, is only slightly less alarming than a siege. Your work doubles. Clean more, smile harder, and above all, say nothing. Everyone's pretending this is normal, but nothing is. You're moved from chamber sweeping to hall duty, It's a step up. Less ash, fewer spiders, but more scrutiny. You now spend hours polishing silver that doesn't need polishing, straightening chairs that haven't moved, and making polite eye contact with knights who look like they'd stab you just to break up the boredom. At dinner, the Lord speaks carefully. His words are chosen like chess moves. Of course we've maintained our levies. No fewer than 30 swordsmen at all times. You know this is a lie. Gerald is 2 of those swordsmen on alternating days. The dark-cloaked visitors nod. They ask nothing about the missing dagger, but you feel it in the air. Everyone does. And here's a fun aside to distract you. Did you know that castle halls were sometimes built with intentionally echoing acoustics, so conversations would carry more easily, or, in paranoid cases, so eavesdropping was harder to pull off unnoticed? You're starting to think your castle was designed for exactly that reason. Every word bounces. Every whisper hums. One evening, you overhear a phrase you don't forget. If that letter reaches the March Lords before we do, the treaty fails. So now it's a treaty. Whatever was in the scroll, it could shift power, break alliances, maybe even spark conflict. And you, the lowly servant with the mop and the turnip stew, are the only one who saw it change hands. You don't want to be part of this, not even a little, but castles have a way of choosing their players. At midnight, a knock rattles your chamber door. It's not the steward, not Gerald, it's one of the king's men. You. Walk with me. You throw on your cloak and follow him through the stone corridors. He's silent. He leads you up the tower stairs, all the way to the watch point. There, beneath the stars, he finally speaks. You saw something. I know it. You hesitate. Whatever you think you saw, he continues, say nothing. Not to the Lord, not to the steward, certainly not to the guest should he return. He hands you a coin, thick, gold, marked with a crest you don't recognize. Stay quiet, or choose a different kind of service. And then he's gone. You stare out over the darkened lands. The castle below you hums with life, fires burning, dogs barking, soldiers sharpening blades. Suddenly you don't feel like a servant anymore. You feel like a witness. And in a medieval castle, witnesses rarely live long. You keep the coin hidden, tucked deep into your straw mattress, beneath a layer of old linen and a beetle or two. It lies like a burning secret. Every time you lie down, it presses against your thoughts, a heavy little truth you're pretending isn't there. Gerald doesn't notice, or if he does, he says nothing. He's too busy complaining about the knights, how they don't clean their own boots, how they sneer when served gruel, how one of them definitely spat in the fire just to hear it sizzle. You nod and murmur and keep your head down. But around you the tension rises. The castle has shifted. Where once the air smelled of roast meat and damp stone, now it reeks of anticipation. The corridors echo with cautious footsteps. The guards double their patrols. Even the Lord seems frayed around the edges. He snaps more, eats less, and has been spotted pacing the battlements long after midnight. You find yourself pulled from routine duties more often, tasked with odd errands. Deliver this sealed parchment to the armory. Tell the kitchen to hold back 3 extra rations for riders unknown. Light the northern watch beacon, but don't ask why. You're becoming useful, which, ironically, is dangerous. See, in a medieval castle, being useful often means you've seen too much. You know the back corridors. You know who snuck into whose chamber. You know which doors creak and which ones don't. You're not important enough to be respected, but just valuable enough to be watched. You clean the guest chamber again, now permanently empty. The scroll is gone. So is the silk glove. But there's a new item beneath the bed. Someone left a sprig of yew bound with red thread. A curse? A warning? A superstition? Historians still argue whether these charms were meant to protect the bearer or doom them. You toss it in the fire, just in case. That night, the castle plays host to a new visitor, a cloaked figure on horseback, riding alone under a moonless sky. No insignia, no escort. They enter silently, and within an hour, they're cloistered with the Lord in the solar. You hear them arguing through the door, hushed but fierce. You catch a single phrase. The south is moving faster than we planned. Then silence. Later, when you're sent to fetch wine, you glimpse the cloaked figure again, face still hidden. They nod at you, a polite, almost sad gesture. The next morning, they're gone. But in their place, the castle receives a gift: 3 crates of chainmail, a cask of hardened nails, and several dozen arrows with bright blue fletching. You don't need to be a war scholar to understand what this means. They're preparing, not for a feast or a guest or even a hunt. They're preparing for battle. And now, suddenly every creak in the stone seems louder. The drawbridge gets oiled. The blacksmith works from dawn to dusk, sparks flying from the forge like angry bees. The steward barks orders like a ship captain mid-storm: reinforce the battlements, tighten the food stores, ration the wine. You're told to assist the mason, which, as it turns out, means hauling buckets of mortar up and down uneven stairs for hours. Your back hates you. Your knees file a formal complaint. You're given gloves that don't fit and shoes that fall apart halfway through. You slip twice. Once on moss, once in something you hope was just soup. And in between tasks, you hear it. Whispers. Whispers of marching feet in the south. Whispers of alliances crumbling. Whispers of that missing noble, still on the run, carrying something vital. You try to focus on your work. Try not to imagine what happens if soldiers do come. Try not to picture the castle gates splintering under a battering ram. Here's a cold fact. Many medieval castles weren't designed to withstand full-scale sieges, especially the smaller ones. Outposts, family holds, political markers. If a real army came, your walls might buy you a day, maybe 2. So you start preparing too. You set aside dry bread, a candle stub, a knife hidden beneath the floorboard, just in case. And then, one night, the bells ring again. But this time it's not for fire, or for a feast. It's for lockdown. The drawbridge is raised, all gates sealed. The Lord makes an announcement from the high window. There is no cause for fear, only prudence. All will continue as normal. You know that's nonsense. Nothing continues as normal once you hear the groan of chains across the main portcullis. The next day, the knights vanish from the hall. The steward grows more paranoid. The cook burns the soup and doesn't even notice. Even the dogs seem jumpier. And you're asked to run a message, not inside the castle, outside. Through a side gate, under cover of dusk, you're handed a sealed parchment and told to ride, yes, ride, to a nearby abbey. I'm not a rider, you protest. You are now, says the steward, pushing the reins into your hand. The horse, mercifully, is small and lazy, but it's still faster than your legs. You ride into the forest, alone. It's your first time beyond the castle walls in weeks, maybe months, and the world feels both enormous and frighteningly quiet. The trees swallow the sound of hooves. The sky yawns overhead. You cling to the saddle, praying the abbey isn't far. And then, as you round a bend, you see him, the missing noble, or someone who looks exactly like him, standing beside a campfire, holding something wrapped in cloth. He sees you, and smiles. Well, he says, took you long enough. You turn the horse, heart galloping faster than your mount, but it's too late. He steps forward, lifts the cloth, and reveals the dagger, the one that vanished, still polished, still gleaming, and in his other hand, the scroll, the one with the broken seal. You swallow. I don't want any trouble, you mutter. I do, he replies, eyes glinting. Then he tosses something toward you, another coin, just like the one hidden in your bed. You'll have to choose, he says softly. Sooner than you think. Then he vanishes into the trees. You ride on, pulse pounding, hands tight on the reins, and you realize you're not a servant anymore. You're a messenger. In a story with no clear heroes, you return just before dawn, cloaked in silence and damp fog. The castle looms ahead, its silhouette strangely smaller now. Maybe it's you who's changed. Maybe once you see the forest, the real world, you realize the walls are just stone, the guards just men, and none of them can stop what's coming. You pass through the side gate again. The steward greets you with a grunt, takes the sealed message, and doesn't ask how the ride went. No one does. That might be the strangest part, how little anyone wants the truth right now. Back in your chamber, you finally sleep, fitfully. You dream of the noble's smile, of scrolls unraveling like snakes, of coins that whisper your name. When you wake, something's different. There's music, not festive music, no drums or pipes, just a single flute, somewhere above the solar. It plays a slow, drifting tune that makes the castle feel like it's holding its breath. A warning? A lullaby? You can't tell. You dress quickly, nervous. The day begins like any other. Wash basins refilled, fires stoked, soup thickened with yesterday's bread. But no one talks. Even Gerald is quiet. That alone should have told you the day would spiral. At mid-morning, a messenger from the king arrives. Not one of the shadowy agents, but an official herald, complete with gold-threaded tabard and 2 pompous assistants who do nothing but adjust his scroll case. He's here for answers, and he's not subtle about it. The entire staff is summoned. You're lined up in the courtyard, shivering as the wind whips through the open gatehouse. The Lord speaks first, calm and practiced. We have nothing to hide, which, as you know, is hilariously false. The herald nods, unrolls a parchment, begins asking questions, simple ones at first. Has anyone come or gone unrecorded? Has anyone seen this dagger? Has any scroll changed hands? Then the harder ones. Who's been near the solar after dark? Who has access to the side gates? Who left the castle yesterday? Your heart hammers. No one looks at you. No one points. But they know. You feel the cook's eyes on you, the steward's silence, even Gerald's unease. You're radioactive now. Too many questions swirling around you. Too many odd errands. Too many secrets stacked up like firewood. Still, no one speaks. That's the first miracle of the day. The second miracle, the steward sends you back to work. Just like that. No shackles, no accusations, not even a warning. But you're not relieved. You're spooked. Because instead of punishment, they're giving you freedom. And in a medieval castle, sudden freedom is either a reward or a trap. You carry on. Sort of. You sweep with a broom that doesn't touch the ground. You deliver trays you don't remember preparing. You nod at people you once trusted and now only fear. And all day, one question clings to your ribs, like cold. What's on that scroll? Here's where things get weird. You're walking the outer corridor, the one just behind the Lord's chamber. You've walked it 100 times. But today, you notice something new. A draft. A cool, consistent breeze, slipping out from behind a tapestry. You lift it. Stone. Dust. A hairline crack where 2 bricks don't quite meet. A hidden door. You don't press it. Not yet. Instead, you mark it with a drop of candle wax. Just a tiny flick, right at eye level. Then you walk away. You don't sleep that night. You wait until Gerald snores like a drowning goat, then slip out. You pass the watchman. He's nodding off against the wall, drunk on mulled cider, and make your way back to the tapestry. The wax glows faintly in the moonlight. You press. Click. The wall swings inward just enough for you to squeeze through. Inside, stone stairs, descending sharply. You've just discovered a hidden passage, probably one of several. These things were common in larger castles, used by nobles to escape sieges, meet lovers, or spy on guests. Some were so secret they were forgotten for generations. Yours leads to something strange. A small room, circular, windowless, lit by a single oil lamp that shouldn't be burning but is. And in the center, a table with maps, letters, and a seal you recognize. It's the seal from the scroll, the missing scroll, and beside it, a half-written message. Not in your Lord's hand. You've seen his writing, thick, aggressive, overly flourished. This one is careful, precise. Maybe the cloaked visitors? You step closer. The first lines are enough to send your stomach lurching. To the southern command, delay the envoy. The northern pass is weakened. Their supply lines depend on the river route. This isn't diplomacy. It's sabotage. Someone in this castle is leaking military information, planning something, setting up a collapse. You should leave. But you don't. You study the maps. The blue feathered arrows you saw delivered days ago are marked in red ink, aimed directly at your castle. This is bait. Your castle is being offered up as a sacrifice. A distraction, maybe. A flashpoint to draw out enemies or burn up resources. You step back, accidentally knocking over a stool. It clatters loudly. You freeze. Footsteps. Not yours. Someone else is in the passage. You blow out the lamp and press against the wall. Silence. Then, a whisper, so close you can taste it. You should have stayed a servant. You bolt. Out of the chamber, up the stairs, back through the tapestry, down the corridor, through the scullery, into the laundry chute. Don't ask how you fit, and finally into the barrel room, where you collapse behind a cask of vinegar and try not to cry. You don't sleep. Again. At sunrise you make a decision. You're going to leave. Not for good. Just long enough to clear your head. You'll tell the steward you need herbs from the village apothecary. Say, Gerald's got a boil. He won't argue. And for once things go smoothly. You make it out. The air smells fresher than it has in weeks. The village is just stirring. Smoke curls from chimneys. Children chase chickens. A baker waves, assuming you're just another errand boy. But you're not here for errands. You're here to see the scribe. Every castle village had one. Usually half-blind, ink-stained, and brilliant. Yours is no exception. He lives above the mill, surrounded by scrolls and theories and half-translated text about Roman aqueducts and Viking burial rites. You find him muttering to himself over a cracked tablet. He squints at you. You're the stew boy. Not anymore, you reply, and hand him the coin. The same kind the noble gave you. The same kind the king's man gave you. The scribe studies it. Then he looks up, eyes suddenly sharp. Where did you get this? You smile sadly. Depends on whose side you're on. You sit with the scribe under the heavy beams of his cluttered room, the air thick with the scent of ink and old parchment. He's poring over the coin, turning it in his gnarled fingers like it's a puzzle piece from a world you're only beginning to glimpse. The scribe's eyes glint with a mix of curiosity and caution. This coin, he begins, isn't from around here. It's from a mint in the south, minted just last year. That blue feather on the arrows? It's the mark of a minor noble house, one that's been feuding with your lord for decades. You lean in, heart pounding. The pieces you thought you understood are shifting beneath you like a loose floorboard. Historians still argue whether these minor noble conflicts were really political or just old family grudges dressed up in armor, he adds, smirking as if amused by the idea of armies marching over petty insults. But one thing's for sure, they made life hell for the people stuck inside the castles, and you're right in the middle of it. You nod, feeling the weight of the scribe's words settle in your chest. The conversation drifts to more obscure topics. The use of medieval coinage as secret messages, the bizarre superstitions tied to different metals, and the curious tradition of hiding small charms in the castle's mortar for protection. The scribe tells you that some castles even use dried toad skins or bits of whalebone as luck, though no one really knows if they helped or just smelled bad. You can't help but chuckle, imagining a lord fretting over his lucky toad skin while the enemy stormed the gates. As the afternoon wanes, you realize the scribe is offering you something unexpected, a plan. He believes the hidden passage you found was meant not just for escape, but for secret communication, a way for loyalists inside the castle to coordinate with allies outside without drawing suspicion. But you'll need proof, he warns, something to show the Lord, or whoever's really pulling the strings here, that you're trustworthy. You think back to the coin again, and then to the scroll. If you could get your hands on both, maybe you could tip the balance. The scribe produces a crude map, a rough sketch of the castle's underground passages and the village beyond. If you're going to do this, he says, you need to move fast. The castle's no longer safe. You glance at the window. Dusk has begun to settle, turning the sky the color of old bruises. It's a perfect time for secrets. As you prepare to leave, the scribe's parting words echo in your mind. Remember, in a castle, the walls have ears, but the stones have memories. You wonder what stories these ancient stones might whisper, if only you could listen closely enough. Outside, the wind picks up. It carries the scent of smoke and something else, something metallic and sharp. You grip your cloak tighter and step into the coming night, knowing that every choice from here on will echo in the halls of history. Night deepens as you slip back into the castle through the hidden passage, heart thudding like a drumbeat in a festival of dread. You move silently, the scent of damp stone and aged timber wrapping around you like a cold shroud. The castle feels different at night, less a home and more a labyrinthine trap with eyes in every shadow. You make your way to the solar, where the Lord's private documents are kept, hoping to find the missing scroll and the dagger. It's a risky move. If caught, you know what awaits you: chains, interrogations, or worse. As you press your ear to the heavy oak door, you catch muffled voices inside, urgent, low, and unmistakably tense. The Lord and the cloaked visitor from before, the one who handed you the coin. They're arguing again, words you can't quite catch, but the tone is sharp and final. You wait, holding your breath, counting the seconds until the door creaks open. When it does, the cloaked figure steps out first. The hood falls back, revealing a sharp face marked by fatigue and determination. "Go," he says, voice barely above a whisper. The scroll is secured. You have what you need. Then he's gone. You step inside, the faint glow of a candle illuminating the room's chaos. Papers scattered, maps folded and unfolded, the glint of the dagger resting on the Lord's desk. You grab the scroll carefully, your fingers trembling slightly. The seal is broken, but the parchment is intact. The dagger feels cold in your hand, its edges sharper than you imagined. You slip both into your cloak, heart pounding. As you turn to leave, a sudden noise, a creak, a footstep, freezes you. The Lord stands in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Looking for something?" he asks, voice calm but heavy. You swallow. "No, my lord, just checking the room." He steps closer, eyes narrowing. You catch a flicker of something, anger, fear, before he turns away, disappearing down the corridor. You don't wait to find out. You slip out through the passage, heart racing. Once outside, you hurry to the scribe's cottage, clutching your prize. The scribe studies the scroll by candlelight. His face tightens as he reads. "This confirms it," he says finally. "Your lord is betraying the crown. These orders will cripple the northern defenses." You nod. "What now?" "We must warn the king, and fast." "But how?" "The castle is sealed tight. The Lord's spies are everywhere. You're trapped between loyalty and survival, between truth and silence." You realize the only way out is through the forest, following the same path the noble took. Your fingers tighten around the dagger. The night awaits. The forest is alive with the sounds of night, rustling leaves, distant hoots, and the scurry of small creatures unseen. You press forward, the scroll and dagger tucked safely beneath your cloak. your breath rising in quick, visible puffs in the cool air. Every snap of a twig beneath your boots sounds like a shout in this heavy silence, and you wonder if the forest itself is conspiring to reveal your secret. You recall stories you've heard from villagers, how forests near castles were often laced with traps, pitfalls camouflaged with leaves, sharpened stakes hidden beneath moss, even tame wolves trained to patrol suspicious areas. Historians still argue whether these stories were exaggerated warnings or actual medieval security measures. Either way, you move carefully, eyes scanning the shadows. Your path eventually leads to a small clearing where an ancient oak stands, its branches sprawling like the arms of a giant guardian. You remember from the scribe's map that this is a known meeting point, one used by spies, messengers, and sometimes rebels. Beneath the oak, you find the faint impression of a footprint, too large for a commoner, too small for a knight. Someone's been here recently. Your pulse quickens. Suddenly a soft voice calls your name. You whirl around. A figure steps from the shadows, a woman cloaked and hooded, but her eyes gleam with unmistakable recognition. "You shouldn't be here," she says, voice low but firm. "Nor should you," you reply, gripping the dagger beneath your cloak. She laughs softly. "Touché, but I'm here to help." Her name is Elara, a servant turned informant working secretly against your lord's schemes. She shares rumors of unrest in neighboring castles, whispers of an alliance forming against the king, and tales of betrayal that stretch beyond your own walls. As you listen, you realize the situation is even grimmer than you imagined. This isn't just about your castle, it's a chessboard, and you're a pawn caught between kings and traitors. Elara pulls out a small folded note and hands it to you. "This is a safe route out of the forest. Follow it if you want to reach the king." You study the crude drawing, memorizing landmarks, the broken stone bridge, the hollowed pine, the twin streams converging at the old mill. Before you part ways, she warns you. "The Lord's men will be searching. Trust no one." You nod, heart heavy but determined. The forest seems less threatening now, but the weight of what lies ahead presses down like the night sky itself. You begin your journey to the king's court, knowing that every step could be your last, but also your chance to change everything. The forest's darkness deepens as you follow the path Elara marked. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl sharpens your senses. Your mind races. Every shadow could hide a foe. Every whisper could be a trap. The medieval world never slept easily, and you certainly won't tonight. You remember that medieval castles often had signal systems, smoke, torches, even trained birds, to warn of danger or call for help. Historians still argue whether these systems were effective or mostly theatrical displays of power. Either way, you stay alert for any signs. The broken stone bridge comes into view, worn and crumbling, yet sturdy enough to carry you across the cold, rushing stream below. You step carefully, the sound of water a soothing counterpoint to the pounding of your heart. It's hard to believe this fragile path is your lifeline to safety. Suddenly a snap to your left. You freeze, dagger drawn, breath held. A figure steps out, an old man, hunched, eyes sharp beneath a tattered hood. "Lost, are you?" he asks, voice raspy but calm. You tighten your grip but say nothing. He chuckles, a dry sound like brittle leaves. "Don't worry, I'm just a woodsman, though not many travel this way after dark." You sense no threat, but medieval forests were infamous for bandits and worse, highwaymen who preyed on travelers. Some legends even told of ghostly knights cursed to haunt the woods forever. You remind yourself to keep both feet on the ground. The woodsman offers a flask of water, which you accept gratefully. His eyes flicker to the dagger at your side. "That's a dangerous blade," he notes. "Careful with it." You nod, unsure whether to trust him. As you continue, he tells stories, some true, some perhaps exaggerated, about the forest's past. Battles fought beneath its canopy, Secret meetings of conspirators and strange creatures said to roam the shadows. You think of your castle's hidden passage and the secrets it held. In a way, this forest is just another fortress, wild, untamed, and full of unknown dangers. Hours pass. You cross the twin streams at the old mill, just as the note promised. Exhausted but focused, you press on toward the king's court, the weight of the scroll burning in your pocket. You know the journey isn't over. If anything, the hardest part is just beginning. The first pale light of dawn spills across the horizon as you near the outskirts of the king's court. Your legs ache, your cloak is stiff with dew and dirt, but your grip on the scroll remains firm, a tangible symbol of everything at stake. Approaching the court is like stepping into another world. Unlike your grim, cold castle, here the halls buzz with politics, intrigue, and the clatter of servants scurrying to and fro. You watch courtiers whisper in shadowed corners, noble women fluttering their fans like butterflies, and guards pacing with stern faces. You remind yourself, this is the heart of power, and it's exactly where the betrayal you uncovered matters most. You find the chamberlain, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for keeping secrets tighter than the castle gates. You hand her the scroll and the coin, explaining as best you can without giving yourself away. She reads silently, then nods gravely. This confirms what we feared. Your lord's treachery could spark a war that consumes the northern territories. You're ushered into a council meeting, a rare honor for someone of your station, or lack thereof. The king's advisors debate fiercely. Some dismiss the claim as a ploy, others demand immediate action. The tension is thick enough to cut with a dagger, not the one you carry, thankfully. Historians still argue whether such councils were truly decisive or mostly performative, but today your evidence shakes the room. As discussions unfold, you're struck by a quiet realization. Castles, for all their stone and steel, are vulnerable to human failings. Greed, ambition, fear. They're less fortresses and more fragile bubbles waiting to burst. When the meeting breaks, the chamberlain pulls you aside. Your bravery has saved many lives, but beware, enemies lurk everywhere, even here. You nod, aware that your journey is far from over. Later, as you rest in a small chamber, your thoughts drift to the hidden passage, the secret meetings, the silent betrayals. You wonder how many others have uncovered truths too dangerous to speak. Outside, the castle walls glow softly in the morning sun, a reminder that history is made not just by kings and knights, but by those who dare to seek the truth in shadowed places. The days that follow feel like living in a waking dream, where every smile might hide a dagger, and every friendly word could be a poisoned arrow. You find yourself caught between relief and unease, grateful to be away from the castle's oppressive stones, but aware that danger still clings like a shadow. The king's court, with its grandeur and whispered conspiracies, is both a sanctuary and a snare. You observe the courtiers moving like actors on a stage, their faces masks hiding ambition, fear, and secret alliances. It's a reminder that power, medieval or modern, has always been a delicate balance of trust and suspicion. You recall the scribe's words about the stone's memories and think how fitting it is that every place, even the court's polished halls, carries the echoes of countless stories, some heroic, some tragic, all human. As you settle into this new chapter, you realize the journey has changed you. No longer just a frightened soul trapped in a cold castle, you're now a keeper of secrets, a bearer of inconvenient truths. Historians still argue whether the common folk's stories from castles and courts truly reflect the past, or are just legends shaped by time. But for you, the reality was clear. Living inside those stone walls was often a test of endurance, wit, and sheer luck. Now, with the dawn breaking beyond the court's high windows, you take a deep breath. The battle for truth and justice continues. But for tonight, you've survived. And that's something. You close your eyes, the murmurs of the court fading into a gentle silence. Outside, the wind carries a soft, calming song, the same wind that once whispered through your castle's secret passage. Rest comes slowly, like a river easing into still waters. And tomorrow, well, that's a story for another night. The night wraps around you like a velvet blanket, soft and endless. The hard stone walls, the drafty corridors, the endless watchfulness, all fade into the background now. Your breathing slows, your muscles loosen, and the weight of the day melts away. Imagine the castle's stones, old and wise, settling in their place after centuries of turmoil. The wind hums softly outside, carrying away the last echoes of the day's struggles. You are safe here, in this moment between night and dawn. Remember, even the darkest nights give way to morning light, and every story, no matter how fraught, ends with a chance to rest and dream. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.